Formula One needs a title fight between Russell and Verstappen. Both drivers have been exceptional this year and are extremely competitive. George has proved time and time again that he's not afraid to stand up to Max, both on and off the track. Races like Spain 2022, Baku and Vegas 2023, Qatar 2024, and Spain this year are all amazing examples of why we need a full season of these two going band for band. Verstappen will never back down from anyone, and Russell is always hungry to fight against the very best in the sport. This weekend, he added his name to the list of non-McLaren drivers to win a race in 2025 by taking victory at the Canadian Grand Prix. It was a masterclass from start to finish, from fending off the early threat Max posed in those initial few laps to making clinical overtakes when he needed to. Overall, he was faultless. And then there was this moment behind the safety car. Whilst driving behind it, George seemed to try and bait Verstappen into overtaking him. This being in the aftermath of what happened in Spain definitely caused a bit of controversy. So Red Bull lodged a protest to try and persuade the stewards to penalise Russell and strip him of the win. They had a couple of arguments, one relating to Article 55.5 of the sporting regulations, which states that drivers should be penalised if deemed to be driving erratically behind the safety car. And the second protest was about unsportsmanlike behaviour. The first argument was made on the basis that George looked a number of times in his mirror to see where Max was, and Red Bull claimed that he unnecessarily braked along the back straight. This caused Verstappen to momentarily get ahead since he was taken by surprise. They further argued that George immediately reporting it over the radio was done strategically, knowing race control would hear it to prompt an investigation. This is what they claimed was unsportsmanlike behaviour. All of this, however, was just one massive reach. Mercedes presented a way more compelling argument, and Russell himself was actually like his own lawyer in a sense, because the explanation he gave. First, periodic braking is normal behind a safety car to maintain temperature in the tyres and the brakes. Second, at that point in time down the straight, he was already very close to the safety car and wanted to leave some space. Down the back straight was probably the most ideal and safest place to do that. Third, he only checked his mirrors to see if Max was directly behind and only braked when he noticed that he was to the side and completely out of the way. Fourth, George said that Max should have realised that he was too close in the first place and anticipated that he would drop back. And finally, his telemetry showed that the brake pressure he applied was 30 psi, which is not severe at all. Under heavy braking, F1 cars reach around 1000 psi. Regarding the unsportsmanlike conduct, Mercedes said that simply pointing out that Max overtook was nothing but a factual statement. So overall, the whole thing was just a nothing burger. However, Verstappen fans seem to think that he should have been penalised and only wasn't because he's British, which is just cope. The two officials who reviewed this protest were Rui Marquez and Tim Malin. The former is the race director, who's Portuguese, and Malin, who's the sporting director, is in fact British. So there you have it, British bias on full display. Well, one could use that same confirmation bias to claim that he's partisan in favour of Red Bull since he used to work there. That's literally the same logic, taking one aspect of a person's character and using that as the entire reason behind every decision they make. It's just dumb. Max himself had already accepted defeat and didn't think much of the incident. It was his own team that decided to try and win the race cheaply in the stewards' room. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that first. Enough of that melodrama, let's talk about the actual racing. The W16 was looking pretty ominous. On Friday, they were incredibly strong, mainly due to the conditions suiting their car much better. Canada's track surface has a very low abrasiveness, meaning it was much smoother compared to most other circuits. Naturally, this reduces grip, and the tyres tend to run a bit cooler. And Vegas last year is a great example of what the Mercs are capable of when the grip is low and it's difficult to generate higher temperature. However, as the weekend went on, they were fearful that their advantage might be cut down as the track rubbered in and the temperatures rose. Luckily though, in qualifying, it was still cool enough for them to be competitive, and Russell delivered a sensational lap. A lap that was set on the medium tyre, which was the C5 for this weekend. Verstappen also set his best lap on the medium since Pirelli's C6 was just trash. It couldn't last the entire lap without falling off a cliff, and the pace difference between that and the C5 wasn't even that much. Alonso was another driver who set his best lap on the mediums, and it worked out really well for him. McLaren and Ferrari, on the other hand, decided to stick with the soft, and it didn't really work. Ultimately, those who got it right benefited, and those who didn't suffered. Nonetheless, you still got to deliver when it matters most, and that's exactly what Russell did. Max also did a great job to stick in on the front row and set up an all-time classic showdown into turn 1. But all that hype was just for nothing. They all followed each other cleanly through turns 1 and 2, apart from Kimi Antonelli. This kid wasted no time and sent it on Oscar Piastri at turn 3. Knowing he had less to lose, he made the move stick and it paid dividends. He he was able to manage his own race, get close to Verstappen on a couple of occasions too. Whenever there was a crossover point between stops, Kimi would always be hounding Max before Red Bull brought him in. Those pit stops were perfectly timed, to be fair, since Max always managed to keep track position, which was very important. But also, he didn't spend much time, if any, battling with Kimi, which helped him to secure P2. And really, that was the most Verstappen could have achieved. Had he secured pole position, he probably would have won the race, but Russell just did the better job this weekend. Completely faultless from start to finish. Typically, Mercedes haven't been that great in races. Mostly it's been poor tyre management, but generally, they always seem to have struggled with fluctuating performance on a Sunday. However, if they can maintain this consistency, races will become a lot more interesting, because so far, it's literally just been Max versus McLaren. Mercedes have never really had the pace to win up until the Canadian Grand Prix, and Ferrari are quite simply the sorriest organisation I have ever seen. So to see Russell in the mix with Verstappen, Piastri and Norris will make things more unpredictable in the championship. And with all the rumours surrounding his seat and whether Max is going to snatch it away from him, I think his lap on Saturday alone was enough to convince Toto Wolff that he's their driver for the future alongside the 18-year-old Antonelli, who becomes the third youngest driver to stand on the podium in Formula 1 history, doing it in only 10 races. Given how competitive the field has been this year too, that is a mighty achievement. And this breakthrough came at a brilliant time for him and Mercedes, because that last triple header was a complete nightmare. A DNF at his home race in Imola, crashing in Monaco, and then being put on the worst strategy known to man during the race, finishing last. Then, another power unit failure in Spain to put the cherry on top. So seeing him finally get a result he deserves, after such a rough patch of results, was amazing. Just waiting on that first pole position and win, which just feels inevitable. What was also inevitable was the two McLaren drivers coming together. I've got a lot more to say on this topic in a separate video, so look out for that soon. But in summary, this was just a huge misjudgment by Lando. Lucky Oscar didn't DNF, because that would have been the absolute worst case scenario. But the gap between him and his teammate in the championship has been extended to 22 points. It's not the end of the world, since there's still a lot of races left to recover that gap. But Norris needs to stop making so many mistakes under pressure. He had the pace, but not the patience. For some reason, in these wheel-to-wheel battles, he seems to have very little awareness of what's actually happening, which is an issue. Mistakes in qualifying have become a trend for him this season, so inevitably, in order to win, he's going to need to be good at passing other cars, which requires good awareness and racing intelligence. Piastri is phenomenal at that, and it's why he's leading the championship right now. He's just got that killer instinct and clinical execution that Lando simply doesn't have. At that point in time, Norris was the faster driver, but got overly ambitious. It was great to hear him own up to the mistakes straight after the race and take accountability. However, he still needs to iron out those errors. Oscar was struggling for most of the weekend, hitting the wall of champions in FP3 and generally just lacking pace. But P4 was great damage limitation. Verstappen only gained 6 points on him, which is how drivers win championships. Of course, there's still a lot to play for. Mercedes engines this season haven't been the most reliable, and we're yet to see McLaren retire due to power unit issues. That very well could occur in the future, which is all the more reason to maximize results while you can. This circuit didn't really suit the McLaren, but they were still there or thereabouts. In terms of setup, Lando opted for a different suspension, which might last for the rest of the season. Oscar did have it available, he just decided not to use it. There's not too much difference between the two geometries in terms of performance though. It's pretty much personal preference. There was also some confusion as to how Norris got a 5-second penalty that he couldn't serve because of his DNF. Technically, since he completed over 90% of racing laps, he was still classified, which is why the penalty wasn't converted into a grid drop for the next race. And by taking less risk at the start with Antonelli, Oscar kept himself out of any trouble since he's looking at the bigger picture for the championship. But it cost him the chance to equal the record of 9 consecutive podiums with McLaren, a record held by Lewis Hamilton, who, mind you, did this in the first 9 races of his Formula 1 career. Unfortunately though, he's still seeking his first with Ferrari because of their mind-numbing incompetence. In Le Mans, they're out here dominating. Shout out to Robert Kubica. But in F1, what are they actually doing? It's just one drama to the next. Rumours of Fred Vasseur potentially being fired. Ferrari's toxic blame culture striking again. Fred clapped back in the media interviews, saying that as a team, Ferrari have changed everything, except one thing, and then dropped to the mic and refused to elaborate. Now maybe that was a shot at the higher-ups, I don't know, open to interpretation. He also said Italian media basically need to shut up and stop spewing nonsense, as did Lewis and Charles, coming to Vasseur's defense. Leclerc's weekend didn't get off to the best start, crashing very early on in FP1 and missing the entirety of Friday. But his form didn't take a hit whatsoever, and he was looking lightning fast in qualifying. That final run in Q3 was about to be the one. The first sector was electrifying, But sadly, just a few meters later, he made a mistake by braking too late and going deep. Dirty air from Hadjar in front also affected him a bit, but mostly it was his own fault. Lewis did decent, putting it in P5. And this weekend was important for him to gain some confidence after a tough race in Spain. He still didn't look completely comfortable in the car though, and probably won't for the rest of the year. To add more insult to injury as well, he hit a groundhog and sustained damage that he carried from lap 13 onwards. The one race where things actually might look promising, this BS happens. Charles was basically nowhere as well in comparison to those ahead of them. Honestly, being a fan of two drivers who are a part of such a dysfunctional team is so tiring. Coming back to qualifying, they sent Lewis out at the end of Q1 on a brand new set of soft tyres for literally no reason, meaning he only had one new set for Q3. Then in the race, the mastermind strategists decided to box him and bring him out into a whole heap of traffic, losing like 10 seconds in the process, and losing places to Norris and his teammate. That period of the race lost him so much time in fact, that he was basically running another Monaco type race, completely in no man's land, just driving around all by himself. Then, he starts experiencing issues with his brakes, and his race engineer basically just tells him, deal with it. On the other side of the garage, Charles is also having the same issues with his brakes and is told to lift and coast. So now we know that both cars are more fragile than glass. The team also proposed Plan B for Leclerc, and he came back with, I want to go with Plan C, which I assume was the one stop as opposed to the two. His race engineer then replies with, copy, we'll go with Plan B. Like my brother. Did you even listen to what Charles said? I mean, I guess not, because, you know, Plan B is Plan B. And this entire time, I'm literally losing my mind. Lewis made his opinions very clear in the media interviews after the race, basically saying that the way Ferrari operates, they're not ready to fight for championships. And in other news, the sky is blue. Whether this will be the wake-up call for them, with their new recruit publicly criticizing them like this, I don't know. But it's not a good look. No upgrades in the pipeline yet, drivers out there fighting their own race engineers, and the team's overall incompetence. A dedicated video is in the works. Not just one, but multiple. Hamilton feels like he can save them, meanwhile Leclerc is just wasting his prime years. Alonso and Hulkenberg were both in a league of their own in the midfield. Fernando's teammate Lance Stroll was expected to miss his home race, but decided to show up anyway and give us a masterclass. Crashed in FP2, qualified P18, finished last. He also got a 10-second penalty for running Gasly onto the grass. Alpine was sort of nowhere, but Colapinto had a very good qualifying and a decent Sunday. That was needed after rumours about him potentially getting booted. Albon was having a rough time of it, his car just fell apart in Q1, but Williams brilliantly managed to put it back together in time for the final set of runs, where he put everything together under pressure. In the race though, he tried to go around the outside of Colapinto on lap 1, but went onto the grass. Then Williams left him out for too long during the first stint, and the icing on the cake, an engine issue that ended his race. Not the day he wanted, since the track suited their car, but at least Sainz managed to salvage a point. He had a quietly impressive race after starting from the back due to Hadjar impeding him in Q1. Racing Bulls had a bad day in the office. Tsunoda was given a 10th-place grid penalty for overtaking Piastri under a red flag in practice, but then a number of cars overtook under safety car conditions after they crossed the checkered flag, something that Verstappen did in Baku last year, and the FIA let him get away with a warning, but said that future incidents would be punished with more severity. Well, it happened again this weekend, with Antonelli, Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, Gasly, and Ocon. But I guess they decided to let them off the hook because the outrage that would have ensued had they stripped Kimi of his first ever podium in Formula 1 would have been insane. And speaking of Esteban, he pulled off another one of those crazy strategies formulated by Haas, doing 57 laps on the hard tyre before making his one and only pit stop to score points. Overall, the race was pretty uneventful, apart from that collision at the end. Despite the cars being more closely matched, it's not necessarily producing the most entertaining racing, since they're always having to manage issues like overheating and dirty air. I will remain adamant though, that a Russell-Verstappen title fight would feed families. You never know, maybe next year with the new regs, we could see it happen. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on everything that happened down in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.